In this video, I'm going to talk about the most commonly asked questions in job interviews with Palantir. And of course, the focus will be on the behavioral side of things here. I'm going to cover 12 such interview questions, and I'm going to give you some insight as to how to answer or how to not to answer these types of questions. Let's start with the most commonly asked questions in these interviews. Tell me about yourself and your background. And how did you become interested in working at Palantir, and how do your skills and experiences align with the role that you're applying for? Then, will you please introduce yourself? I'm an effective senior program manager with over 20 years of experience delivering complex programs for both government and the private sector, with successful track record of delivering multiple programs heavily geared towards IT, cloud, and business transformation, from design to implementation to handover and revenge recognition. Okay, so obviously this would be an example of how not to go around answering these questions, and I advise you against memorizing answers to interview questions in general. What should be a great approach to go around your elevator pitch? Well, maybe try to give it a bit of structure, maybe use Richard Blazevich structure, such as, you start with a little bit of appetizer. There are two sides of me. I'm into sports and nature, and then gradually transition into your subject matter expertise. Maybe, I don't know, mention 3 highlights from your career, and then try to get to a closing, eventually inviting for a conversation, or inviting them to ask you any questions they might have about your experiences. One trick here would be, if you want to ensure you focus the more interesting ones toward the end of your answer, because maybe those are also more likely to invite for a conversation. So you would start going with the conversation your way, which would be beneficial, right? ChatGPT is also a great resource if you want to see examples of elevator pitches, but long story short, I wouldn't spend too much time on with these things. Second question: can you describe a challenging problem which you faced in a previous role or project, and how you approached solving it? What were the steps you took to address the problem, and what was the outcome? Right, so a challenging situation, right? So this is a behavioral type of question. Ask you for, tell me about the time when, right? And I believe you already know by now that the best way to answer these would be using the STAR format, right? At least if you're not expert with behavioral interviews, then the STAR format would be the best way to go. Situation, task, action, and result, right? Situation and task would actually go hand in hand, right? Now, what's interesting here to understand is that these challenging situations, probably the most commonly asked behavioral question in job interviews, means different things for different roles, right? So, for example, for a software engineer, would be an ambiguous situation would be some challenging bug which you didn't know existed until you found it out. I don't know, and maybe it was challenging to resolve it because you didn't have enough subject matter expertise and you had to gain it, or for some whatever else reason. Or for a business development person, could be a challenging client relationship, right? Or for a PM or for a project or a program manager, could be a challenging project or program, right? Which I'm sure for a PM role, I believe you would answer this easily with your best story, because I doubt your best story wouldn't contain a challenge, right? So this could also be a trick here. Or, for example, for a consultant, again, everything is challenging, but for consultants, I usually advise to try to be concise. Okay, so this would be a challenge which I faced with answers of consultants or people coming from consulting roles with respect to behavioral interviews. But long story short, a challenging problem which you faced is one of the more commonly asked interview questions, behavioral interview questions in these interviews. Number 3, a time when you did not get along with someone. Okay, so again, this is a behavioral type of question. Important here is to understand, why would someone ask you this question in a job interview? They do ask you this because they want to screen on your interpersonal skills, right? So if you, I don't know, if you don't like someone's website, or if you don't get along with someone, you won't DDoS them, to fix the problem. But I believe that you know what I'm saying. The intention is clear here. You see how you work with others, how you build trust, right? So when someone doesn't like you, you have an exchange of something, you have a misunderstanding there, right? And your goal is to bring in clarity, right? For software development engineers, you could simply bring in clarity with some data, with some information. You come with some factual information with the goal to establish trust. Also, communication is something you might also want to mention here, when you want to get along with someone. What people tend to do here, especially people who are not particularly skilled at interviewing, would be to clone someone else's answers. And the problem is that they will sound as such, especially if they follow up with some question there. Usually, the best answers or the real answers for challenging interpersonal exchanges are never perfect, right? So it's something like we're still not best friends, but we still got it working, right? So that's the point. Number 4, how do you stay informed about industry trends and developments relevant to your field? And can you provide an example of a recent trend or innovation that has caught your attention and how it could impact your work at Palantir? Right, so actually these are 2 questions, but they usually go well hand in hand. And it's actually ChatGPT who brought this question. So the first question, how do you learn? Right? How do you stay informed about industry trends? And the classic mistake people do here is, I only learned from that one source for the past 20 years, right? So when you talk about how you learn, you talk about multiple sources, a variety of sources, right? Even from your startups. This could be a great learning experience as well. And the second part of the question talks about something you invented, right? How it could impact your work at Palantir. I believe that's a bit far stretched, but something you invented. Okay, this would be the thing. Could be as simple as a metric if you want, or as complex as a framework in the case of PM roles. For instance, or something I invented. I remember in high school, it was that I invented a software application to compute 2000 to the power of 2000 using dynamic lists. Okay, so this would be for a software engineer if you want, right? That's something inventive, and I'm sure you'll have plenty of examples if you think about it. Just ensure you put them in a star format, and they are relevant to the role that you're applying for, right? You want to sell yourself on your strength here. Number 5, describe a time when you had to work under pressure or to meet tight deadlines. How did you prioritize tasks, manage your time effectively, and ensure the successful completion of the project or task? Right? So why would someone ask you this question in a job interview? It's because they want to see your ability to deliver results, if you want. And the number 1 mistake people do about this, answering these questions, work under pressure, is you find excuses, because a colleague did a mistake, but don't worry, it's a team effort, and so on and so forth. So you must focus on how you delivered, how you took ownership of that situation, and that you eventually which tasks you had to prioritize, and how you did eventually that prioritization, just quickly. And essentially how you manage your time effectively to reach that goal. You must sell yourself as someone capable to deliver, whatever delivery means to your specific role. Again, so for a software engineer, I believe things are a bit more simple here. But for a PM role, you could even go, when it comes to prioritization and managing time, you could even use frameworks to prioritize and manage time and manage others, and so on and so forth. I mean, I found that during job interviews, if you are able to pitch some keywords from some frameworks, you will gain a lot more credibility in your answers and effectively make them considerably better, right? So this would be about delivery. Number 6, how do you approach collaborating with cross-functional teams or stakeholders to achieve project goals? And can you provide an example of a successful collaboration experience and how you contributed to the team's success? Okay, so again, a behavioral question. Why would someone ask you such a question in a job interview? Well, because they want to screen on your interpersonal skills. So if you remember, we previously had one such question, a time when you had a conflict with someone. It's on the same lines, when you had a conflict with someone, you have to reestablish trust. How do you approach collaborating with cross-functional teams? Well, you have to build trust somehow, right? So, or another classic example, classic scenario is when you influence an outcome, right? So, for instance, I had someone who talked about how they influenced the adoption of Skype over Citrix as web conferencing tools in their bank. Okay, so they were using Citrix, and his job was to pitch Skype to everyone else because it was the better solution at that time. And how they did that, how they went about it, because no one was interested in learning new software in the beginning, was to eventually pitch this to the 10 most significant executives they had, that they would support them during this transition period. And eventually 9 out of 10 of those executives got on board. And within 2 years, 80% of conversations were held through Skype versus Citrix, right? So this is how they eventually built trust. And this is how they collaborated successfully, cross-functionally. And they also talked about their an important metric in their results, the 80% adoption. Okay, so this would be how you go around this. It's much easier once you understand why the question gets asked with these things. And of course, to the extent you have a few stories in your story bank too. Right, number 7, tell me about the time when you failed. Okay, I never fail, I only learn. Okay, so this would be the classic excuse of someone who didn't prepare this question for a job interview. Or another classic mistake is that you try to cover your mistake like it wasn't something really important and so on and so forth, which again, you could get away with it if the interview wouldn't be so intense, which is not the case these days. But the best way to answer these questions would be to find a time when you actually failed and to focus on what you learned from it, to sell yourself through the learnings you had. So if you remember the STAR format, situation, task, action would be 50% of your failure, right? Situation, task, and action. And the result, you would replace them with the learnings. And this would be the second 50% of your answer, right? So this is not straightforward from experience, and it will take you at least around 3 attempts to find a proper answer to these failure questions. But the benefit of this is this: if you prepare it seriously in advance and you find something convincing, you will significantly differentiate yourself from other candidates, because not many people can answer this rather counterintuitive and even difficult behavioral questions. Okay, so this would be about failure. Number 8, can you discuss a time when you had to make a difficult decision with limited information? And how did you approach the decision-making process, and what were the results? Okay, so a difficult decision with limited information. How do you handle ambiguity? Okay, how do you cut through ambiguity? Right, and this refers to your ability to make complex decisions in ambiguous situations. Okay, and expectations greatly differ by the role you're applying for. In other words, software development engineer, yes, you are supposed to be able to make decisions with limited information, but that's not as key as for a PM role, where you have to deal with such ambiguity, with the lack of information, and even use your gut feeling constantly to prove that you are able to consistently decide the right thing over and over again. Great leaders are right a lot. Okay, remember this expression. This is what you want to sell yourself on here, that you're someone able to, when you don't have that information, you will do your best to find it. Maybe you'll learn something, maybe you'll delegate someone to find that limited information, maybe you'll get that data somehow from somewhere, you'll commission some research study to find that information. But also, it's also a matter of gut feeling up to a certain extent. So you'd have to find an example where you did this successfully, and to prove that yes, I'm someone who's able to make these difficult decisions with limited information, right? And of course, you would want to talk about a positive result here. There is a tendency for some people to talk about a project which wasn't great in the end, but their decision making was great, so they would say, but what I would recommend you instead would be to sell the project as a great one, right? To talk about the results, how it was a great project, because you want to sell yourself on the stuff you own as being someone successful, right? Unless they ask you for a failure story, of course. All right, number 9, describe a project or initiative you led from concept to completion. What were the key challenges you faced, and how did you ensure the project success? Okay, so a project start to finish. It's a classic interview question, more likely for senior roles, and it's actually quite linked with the next one. How do you approach problem solving and critical thinking in your work? Can you provide an example of a complex problem you solved and the approach you took to reach a solution? Okay, so I'd like to mention this both because I believe the essence is you have to talk about a key highlight from your career, but the interesting part is on why they would ask you this, because they want you to perform a test that's called deep dive, a deep dive test. There's a backbone test, for instance, there's a deep dive test, and the backbone test, the name implies, they would ask if you actually owned that project, right? But going back to the deep dive, a complex project or a project that you lead from start to finish, basically what candidates overestimate in these job interviews is their ability to remember key details from their achievements, right? This is why deep dives get asked. And what happens here is if you don't remember those key details, which, spoiler alert, in my coaching sessions happens around 80% of the time, because I ask a ton of follow-up questions and I usually get people stuck this way, right? But when you don't remember this, then you get in trouble, because in the worst case scenario, they might think you didn't own the project, right? It wasn't your decision. Or in a better scenario, to say, hey, but this guy is only superficially prepared for the interview, and that seems a little bit ambiguous. When you cannot remember key details of your projects, then it won't be perceived too positively. All right. So again, deep dives are also the starting point for the backbone test, right? Because if they ask you for details to bring in clarity to a highlight which happened, I don't know, a few years ago, and you can't remember them, then you won't have as much backbone. You won't show as, yes, he's the qualified candidate whom I strongly believe he can do the job, right? And what I would recommend you here is to test yourself. Hey, can you do a deep dive? Can you speak for 15 minutes straight about some achievements, projects which you did start to finish, and still make sense and still score high in clarity of thought? Because that's, in at least for senior roles, the saying is like this: if you can give 10 to 15 minutes answers to behavioral questions that are convincing, then you are perceived as a significantly better candidate in a job interview. So can you talk for 15 minutes straight about your achievements? If you do, with some key metrics and everything else with a star format, then I believe that's a great way to say, yes, I'm confident about my ability to talk about about complex projects and projects which are let's start to finish, right? Number 11 here. Give me an example of a time when you had to adapt to a rapidly changing environment or situation. How did you adjust your approach, and what was the outcome? Okay, so why would someone ask you this question? To adapt to a rapidly changing environment or situation? Well, how you deal with stuff when speed is of essence and speed is critical. Okay, so for example, a software development engineer could be a critical bug which you fixed on time, or for business development, a client changed the request on short notice, and you have to find a way to still to be successful in that pitch. For example, a time when I had to deal with a rapidly changing environmental situation was when I was a PM and I would run HR B2B software, and we were selling some sort of multi-rater report that companies could run with their employees to gather feedback. And we spent around 3 months developing those templates of forms and everything else with some system administration. We allowed them to design their own beautiful forms and so on and so forth. And then in the last 2 weeks, we actually, since the project went well, we decided to trial that multi-rater survey with some of our customers. And when we trialed it, we realized, or I should say, realized that no one actually cared about the forms in that multi-rater surveys, but everyone cared about the reports and how the reports lacked certain features, which were targeted for the executive audience. And basically all the feedback was on the report. So that's when I realized, hey, something is not right here. So I prefer to delay the release of the multi-rater report by 2 weeks, which was, not a lot. If you put it into the deadline was 3 months. And in turn, that multi-rater survey turned out to be the most used feature in our software, simply because I pivoted the focus to the features which matter the most for the key stakeholders in the project in a rapid pace environment. And we were really pressed on time during that project, right? So I adapted myself to the needs of the customer and actually was successful. Now, of course, the story could sell myself on many other stuff, such as customer obsession and stuff like that. But still, that's and by the way, customer obsession isn't something I found much in questions at Palantir. Right. So this was number 11 and 12. Finally, why do you want to work at Palantir, and how do you see yourself contribute to the company's mission and goals? Dan, thank you very much for taking time to interview with us. But why did you choose our company? Oh, why not? You are an exceptional company with some amazing people. You are the number one in the industry. I've always dreamed of working for a company like yours. Right, so the point is to find something that is more interesting, something to differentiate yourself from other candidates. And some of the more peculiar answers, if you want, on why do you want to work for this company would be that, hey, I'm not sure I want to work for your company just yet. I'm just here to learn more about what you can offer and whether my expertise can benefit or can create a mutually beneficial working relationship. But the point is that don't just compliment them because they hear this over and over and over again. And for an interviewer who does this all day long, this will not score you many points. So find something really interesting on why do you actually want to work there. Maybe it's the team, maybe you found some interesting product that you're generally interested in contributing to, but I believe you get the point. So these were the top 12 questions that are asked in job interviews with Palantir. I hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.